We're live and recording.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the April 27 Committee of Bar Examiners Subcommittee on Examination Administration meeting. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. I call this meeting to order. Brenda, please call the roll.
Burns,
Here.
Cow,
Here.
Gongoa, absent. Kramer,
Here.
Smith, not here. Yokosen,
Here.
we have quorum.
Thank you. As required by the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, members are to appear visibly on camera during teleconference meetings, except if a member is unable to appear by video due to connectivity challenges. We ask that any members who are present with their cameras off state their names and reasons for not being on camera. Additionally, if a member joins the meeting after roll call, they should raise their hands virtually to notify the chair and the public of their presence. If their camera is off, they should provide an explanation. Members should also raise their hands when leaving and returning to the meeting if they will be absent for more than 5 minutes. At this time, I'm going to call for public comment. Before we begin public comment, I would like to remind everyone that under the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, public comments must pertain to items that are on the agenda or be related to matters that are within the jurisdiction of this agency. Specifically, the subcommittee exercises oversight over the administration of the California Bar Examination and the first-year law students examination. The subcommittee does not have authority over attorney discipline, and there are no attorney discipline matters on the agenda for today's meeting. Members of the public wishing to comment were encouraged to submit written comments prior to the meeting to ensure that the subcommittee would have time to consider those comments. The subcommittee has received and read all the public comments. We thank you for that, all the written public comments, and we thank you. To facilitate hearing as many members of the public as possible, I encourage you not to repeat points that were made by previous speakers. For those who are participating by Zoom video, you should have a function for virtually raising your hand. It is a hand icon and should appear at the bottom center of your screen. If you wish to address the subcommittee, please click the hand icon now, and the committee coordinator will call on you in the order that hands are raised. For those who are participating by phone, you may virtually raise your hand by pressing *9. That is the star key, then the number 9. Again, doing so will alert staff that you would like to make a comment, and the committee coordinator will call upon you and open your microphone so that you can address the committee. For those of you who are participating from a notice location, please alert the committee member or the state bar staff present in the room that you would like to make comment. Staff will have an on-screen countdown timer visible to all attendees during the duration of your comment. The timer's 2-minute countdown will begin as soon as you start your comment. The on-screen timer will flash throughout the final 10 seconds. Brenda, do we have any advanced signups?
No, we do not.
And do we have any members of the public at any of the notice locations?
We do not in San Francisco.
Seeing none in LA or San Francisco. Doesn't appear that there are at any of the other locations. Brenda, we will now proceed with those who raise their hand remotely.
We do not have anyone with raised hands remotely.
Okay. Then thank you. With that, I will close public comment. Let's go to item 1.1 on the agenda. The first item on the agenda is the chair's report. After our March 4th, 2026 subcommittee meeting, a notice of intent to award was issued identifying Prometric LLC as a vendor selected to administer the first-year law students exam beginning with the October 2026 admission. On March 25th, 2026, the Board of Trustees approved the contract amount for Prometric for a 2-year term. That concludes my report. Next on the agenda is item 2.1, open session meetings for November 24, 2025. I was thinking, can we take all three of these? We have 3 sessions of meetings to approve. Can we take this as one omnibus motion? If nobody has any comments? And let the record reflect that member Julianne Smith has joined the meeting from San Francisco. Does anybody have any? So let's look at items 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. Open session meetings for November 24th, January 9th, and March 4th. Does anybody have any suggestions or comments for any of these meetings?
I thought they were all fine, so I'd move their approval as a group.
Okay, is there a second?
I will second that. This is Michael.
All right. Who's going to call the roll? Brenda? Could you please, the motion is to approve all 3 of these open session meetings minutes. Brenda, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Burns,
Yes.
Cow,
Yes.
Gongora absent, Kramer,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Yokosen.
Yes.
With 5 ayes, the motion carries.
Okay, and if I didn't say it before, I believe it was Dr. Cow seconded that. Kramer moved,
Yes.
Cow seconded. All right.
Hey, Alan, your volume level's below everyone else's. I wonder if you could raise it a little on your end.
How's that?
Yes, better, thanks.
Okay. Let's move on. Item 3.1, discussion and action, if appropriate, on vendor proposals to administer the California bar exam, beginning with the February 2027 administration. Tara Clark, Program Director, will lead this discussion. Tara?
You everyone, thank you for joining us today. So I think, as you may recall, the subcommittee approved the business requirements and the rubric for the new vendor to administer the bar exam at our January 9th meeting. And then those were subsequently approved by the Committee of Bar Examiners and the Board of Trustees on January 23rd. Those were the business requirements were incorporated in the RFP that was issued on March 9th, and the rubric was used by the panel to evaluate the submissions. We notified 10 vendors of the opportunity, which was due on April 13th. We ended up having 5 submissions. So the 5 before you are Exam Room AI, Extegrity, ExamSoft, ILG, and Surpass. And so the anticipated contract start date is in August. We did want to get the contract amount approved by the Board of Trustees at its meeting on May 14th and 15th if possible. That way it gives us sufficient time to start a new contract, especially if we go with a new vendor, to ensure that everything is captured in there. And so as a reminder, the panel, it consisted of 2 staff members, so myself and Becky, and then 2 of the subcommittee members, Mr. Kramer and Ms. Smith. And so the submissions were evaluated based on 4 categories. So category A was the responsiveness of the proposal to the submission requirements set forth in the RFP, which was 10 points. Category B was just the agreement with the state bar's contracting requirements, again 10 points. Category C, this is where those business requirements that the subcommittee approved back in January was folded in, and that was for a total of 10 points, and that covered the technical ability, capacity, financial viability, and their ability to overall meet the outlined requirements. And then category D overall was the cost of the proposal, and that was worth 30 points. And just to note on that one, so the procurement team has a formula that they use. So the lowest bid automatically gets 30 points, and then the points were thereafter distributed to the remaining vendors. We can go over any of them if you'd like, but so just to start the discussion. The two proposals from the panel today are either to invite the top two scoring vendors to present at our subcommittee meeting on May 6th before making a decision to issue the notice of intent. And those would be ExamSoft with our overall highest score at 77.7, and then Surpass came in second at 72.7. Alternatively, the Committee of Bar Examiners recently heard from 3 of the 5 vendors. So both All ExamSoft, Extegrity, and ILG in August and September of last year. So the subcommittee could, if it would like, choose to award that notice of intent to the highest scoring vendor today. So those are the 2 options before you. And I will open it up for discussion.
Is there discussion? Paul?
Yeah, I have some exam security related questions that I just checked with Jean, and we believe that they are appropriately discussed in closed session.
Okay.
So we could talk about other things first, but before we make any kind of decision, I need to raise them there.
That's noted. Are there any other thoughts that we can talk about in open session?
Yeah, I had a couple questions for staff.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
I think it's Surpass proposes to electronically transfer the answers to us as a single file rather than individual files, for each separate question. I need to ask staff about their workflow, but it seems to me that could cause us to have to change our process, which may even require programming. That would be an impediment, I think. Tara, any thoughts about that?
I think as it currently stands, it would require just manual staff work to separate those out so that way they're distributed to the graders.
So that would be a lot of work then. We're talking about 9,000 separate files to be broken into 6 pieces, with all the potential for an error to occur in the allocation, right?
Yes, so it would be 6 files per applicant, so it would be a significant undertaking if they're not able to break it down.
Okay, and at a cost to us. It could easily wipe out any difference in the prices.
Just to follow up on that point, it said they could provide consultancy for APIs to extract the information. I'm not sure if that's.
I think the difficulty would be right now, I think as you may recall from the committee meeting, is that our IT team has its hands pretty full. Like we have some of the rule changes that we're having to implement and whatnot. So just having to build in anything extra to attach to the system to do that might be difficult.
Okay, and then also they are insisting on their own contract form. And how does staff, or for that matter, council's office feel about that?
I can start and then maybe Jean can chime in. So we do have some other vendors that do prefer to start with their own master services agreement. I think it takes a little bit more work on our end, and then Office of General Counsel then to just make sure that the appropriate level of details in there. So it's not something that would completely deter us from going with someone, but it could just take a bit more work on our end. Jean, did you have anything to add?
I'll say generally speaking, having not vetted any of the particular agreements, it's not uncommon for a vendor to provide us with their typical agreement, and then OGC does evaluate it, ensures the appropriate safeguards are in there, and works closely with the Office of Admissions to ensure that the business needs are met while ensuring that the legal parameters and requirements are also met. So I don't think that's from OGC's perspective, that is not an absolutely not, is what I would say, Paul.
Extra work though, for sure. And then finally, Surpass cannot have spell check ready for February of 27. and they don't have highlighting in their editing, their word processing feature.
Paul, if I can interrupt for 1 second. Subcommittee member Kareem Grangoria has joined the meeting. Go ahead, Paul.
The applicants they're not scored on spelling or grammar, but I think as we know, leading up to February 2025, spell check is a feature that they wanted and it caused, I think, concern for them when it was not available. So that is something I think it's good for the subcommittee to be aware of.
Okay, and it is one of the reasons why I gave them a lower score on the applicant's experience and using the platform.
And you said the
Um,
highlighting's not available either?
No, but I think the more significant thing for the answer right now, since they don't have the questions in there, it's just the answer field is the spell check is the big one.
Yeah, I think highlighting, Alan, is probably more useful if they were receiving the questions digitally, to be able to mark them up. Let me see if I have any other questions here. None, no, nothing further for open at the moment.
Did anybody else have any comments, questions, thoughts? All right. With that in mind, the committee will now move into closed session pursuant to Business and Profession Code Section 6026.7, Subdivision C3, and Government Code Section 11125, Subdivision C1, to discuss exam security issues relevant to the approval of vendor-approved proposals to administer the California bar exam beginning with the February 2027 administration. The committee will reconvene an open session following the closed session. So you should all have received the link. Let's log out from this and we'll see you in closed. Thank you, everybody. The subcommittee is now back in open session. There is no reportable action from that session. Let's return back to item
Okay.
3.1.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And let's continue our discussion related to item 3.1. Are there any more thoughts about the vendors or the scores? And do we want to make a decision today, or do we want to ask for presentations on May 6th?
I was initially leaning towards making a decision today. And I can go either way. I'm now a little more interested because some of my concerns about surpass may be alleviated, and I know that their price would be lower. Tara, could you kind of give us a rough idea about how much the total cost to us? That's what we care about. There is one aspect of their proposal we would have to discuss, though, but they were a couple $100,000 less. Am I remembering that correctly?
So their total was estimated at 986,600. Our exam soft was at about 1.2 million.
Sorry, their first number was?
986,600. I can put it up if that helps. I have the
Okay, so a little over 200,000, somewhere in that 200,000 plus. It may be worth seeing. On the one hand, we're only talking about 3 administrations of the exam, and we have a workflow with ExamSoft that I think is working. There's nothing's perfect, but it's working pretty well. That's my impression. If somebody wants to tell me otherwise, I'm happy to hear it. So, continuing for the next 3 administrations with them doesn't seem like a bad approach. But if we are concerned about possibly saving some costs, it may be worth looking at both user interfaces. I think that's mostly what a demonstration would tell us, and it would also put them right in front of us so we could ask them some questions. One I would have for Surpass is they're proposing, they say their software just gives us the answers instead of 6 individual files per candidate, 1 for each question. We get 1 file with all of them in that single file, and it would be up to staff apparently to break that out into individual files for distribution. So I would want to know how much that is going to cost us, because that would add to the cost. But otherwise, perhaps seeing the 2 interfaces is a worthwhile endeavor to compare them.
And can I just note for the subcommittee's consideration, I think the reason that Surpass ended up coming in second in the overall rankings was really their the overall cost. If you look at category C, they generally did not rank even second among the panel. I think I had 2 of them tied below ExamSoft, but everybody else did not even have them tied for second. So and that's when compared to those business requirements that the subcommittee had set back in January.
I gather you think you're implying perhaps a recommendation that blew past me.
I simply just wanted to point out that the reason I think that they ended up in second overall was just because of their price was lower, but that the panels did not rate their abilities quite as high as some of the other competitors. So
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And one of the principles that the board adopted and we ratified was that doing it right is more important than doing it cheap. So like I said, I can go either way. I'd be happy with ExamSoft, but if we wanted to look at an alternative to compare it, I could go along with that as well.
I personally would prefer to stay with what's with ExamSoft because of their demonstrated ability. Like you said, Paul, it's only 3 more administrations. There is this cost savings, but the issue that you raise about the individual, giving us one file as opposed to the individual answers, I think that's substantial. I don't know that they would change that in the demonstration.
Or if they make a change, whether the programming will
Allow it.
work seamlessly.
Yeah. I just think we have enough on our plate right now that I prefer to at least, this seems like we're removing one possible issue. Not that anything's perfect, and the ExamSoft could fall apart too. There could be an issue, but that's my view.
Well, I can certainly support that.
Yeah. Other members?
What, Mr. Chair and Paul, what's your hesitancy in doing a presentation? Do you think it's a time issue or?
Well, it's both our time and frankly the vendor's time.
Are we in a time crunch or?
Well,
No, I mean, we have a meeting scheduled we have it penciled in for May 6th. I mean, we'll
Okay,
have to make a decision that day.
yeah.
and if I may, I did check with our procurement team if it would be appropriate to notify all of the vendors of the possibility of the May 6th meeting, and the request for presentations, but they felt it best to hold off until after today, so for whatever that's worth.
I did
Does
not,
that mean we're not sure that they could attend?
That's correct.
Ouch.
did not know that. Okay. Kareem, Crosby, what do you guys think? Do we want to hear presentations? If we do, that's fine.
I always think it's helpful to hear directly from folks. I know it's more time and I know we're probably directionally headed in one area, but I think topics can come up that are unexpected. So I would lean that way, but I'm comfortable really either way.
How about Michael Cow?
I'm comfortable either way we decide. I would agree with Crosby. That's always good to hear a presentation. But then, I think that Alan, you brought up some good points about we got enough on our plate right now, and sometimes it's quality over cost analysis.
Kareem, I'm going to put you back on the spot. What do you want to do?
I'm just hearing the consensus. I'll move that we make a decision today.
Okay, Juliet, I didn't hear from you. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I echo, saying that what others said, that it's, good to hear from the companies, but on the other hand, I didn't rank Surpass as one of the top 2. I thought there were some issues, like some that Paul mentioned. So I'm comfortable with the wording today.
Okay. By the way, is that a typo in the first result? ExamSoft Turnitin?
No, so they're now part of the company Turnitin.
Oh, okay.
The exam software worldwide, so that's what that is.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go with the second resolved initially. Is there a motion? A motion?
I'll move it.
Okay. And is there a second?
I'll second. This is Kareem.
Okay, moved by Kramer, second by Gongora. Resolved at the Subcommittee on Exam Administration directs staff to issue a notice of intent to award, identifying ExamSoft Turnitin as the vendor selected to administer the California bar examination, beginning with the February 2027 administration, subject to approval by the board. Is there any other discussion? Brenda, could you call the roll, please?
Burns,
Yes.
Cow,
Yes.
Gongora,
Yes.
Kramer,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Yokoson.
Yes.
With 6 ayes and 0 nays, the motion carries.
I want to thank, first of all, staff for doing all this work, but also Paul and Juliet. Thank you so much. I know how tedious and how hard this can be, having done this. So thank you very much. Is there any other business before the subcommittee?
So just to notice that, so that we'll go ahead and we'll cancel the May 6th hold.
Yes. All right. With that, I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Thank-
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.